217 Recovery Podcast. What's up? I'm Corey Robbs here.
Hey, what's going on?
We got a special guest, Scott's with us today.
What's happening, fellas?
Nothing, man. You stopped by earlier, and you were talking about, or you asked us a question. You guys have authors on, and we're like, what? Never have. I'll be our first. And you were talking about your book, and if you could tell us again a little bit about it.
Yeah, so the book is called Drowning in Addiction, Sink or Swim, and I've actually co-authored this book with two other people. And to kind of give you just a basic rundown, it's just easiest for me just to run like a chapter rundown. So the first three chapters are our personal stories. They are part one, essentially. Chapters 1 and Chapter 2 are Michael and Andrea's story, where they talk about their active addiction from Michael's having a seizure and flatlining to Andrea having multiple relapses. And then Chapter 3, I come in, and the unique thing about this book is I share the side of the family member. And so I share the story of my dad, who had a severe alcohol problem. Talk about his self-loathing and his numbing, and leading up to taking him off life support and watching him take his last breath. Chapter 4, we go into cultural norms and stigmas. We talk about the retired police chief that has a 30-year alcohol addiction, not because he had this love for alcohol, but because of the images he couldn't get out of his head. The stay-at-home mom that does a line of coke to make herself look bubbly in front of her friends, right? And me, part of my story is I was in the Marine Corps for 13 years, and I also talk about the drinking culture in the Marine Corps. The Marine Corps was born in a bar. Yeah. And so young Marines like to view their binge drinking as a talent versus a problem.
Right, kind of like a rite of passage, maybe.
Essentially, exactly, a rite of passage, and that's that creates massive problems for a lot of people, and that's why we see so much addiction amongst the veteran ranks.
Yeah.
Chapter 5, we talk about the consequences. I talk about financial consequences. I give a spreadsheet of $140,000 worth of medical bills that we found of my dad's just in the last few years of his life because of his addiction. Familial problems, physiological problems, things like hepatic encephalopathy, where you act drunk but haven't had a lick of alcohol, and that's where the methane levels are so high in your bloodstream because your liver and kidneys are not functioning properly. Death is imminent at that point, right?
Is that, I don't mean to interrupt you, Scott, is that close to is that like Korsakoff syndrome or like wet brain, as they call it, or is that just the levels are so high that your body just can't process it?
Honestly, I'm not sure about the other two that you just named, but basically, your liver and kidneys are essentially shot at that point.
Yeah.
And so it can't process the toxins in your blood, and so the toxin levels, the methane levels start to rise in your bloodstream. You act drunk. My dad was pulled over twice on suspicion of drunk driving in a 5-hour span, an hour apart from each other. Blue zeros both times. Zero idea where he was for 5 hours in that hour distance span.
Wow.
But the second time he was the first time he was pulled over, they had zero clue what to do because they thought for sure this dude was drunk that they just pulled over, but he blew zeros.
Yeah.
So they let him go. Well, he was picked up again, or he was stopped again. This time they detained him because they're like, listen, we can't in good conscience let this dude take off.
Yeah.
Right? And so they called my sister 9, 10 o'clock at night. She had to come pick him up. It was like 45 minutes, an hour away. And so that's just one of the physiological consequences that we talk about.
Yeah.
So Chapter 6 and 7 goes into Michael and Andrea's their recovery stories. The start, right? Michael shares her journey through rehab, almost a day-by-day account. Andrea, she talks about her several different relapses that she's had and that kind of thing. There's a curveball now. So in Chapter 6 and 7, Chapter 8 is my part 2. Now, the reader's sitting there reading these books, reading these chapters, like, okay, the author's getting their life straight, everything's good, and then they get to my chapter. They get to the family member's chapter. Mm-hmm. And now I start talking about the downward spiral I went through. 3 months after my dad's death, my son was born. Within his first year of life, I was having an affair on my wife, and now we worked things back out, and we're actually doing very well, but the Marine Corps found out about the affair, and this was right at the time they were going through drawdowns, and so I gave them a golden ticket to kick me out with an other than honorable discharge.
Yeah.
I was a criminal investigator at the time. I'd spent 13 years in the Marine Corps. I lost my top secret clearance. I would never be a criminal investigator ever again anywhere. Wouldn't be a cop, wouldn't be a Fed anywhere. Got kicked out, had to completely reinvent myself. And so I share that part of the story too. After my downward spiral, how I start to come back up, becoming a coach, going through being a personal trainer and those kind of things, the different jobs that I had, being fired from these jobs, all the way now, being a coach, being an author, and being a public speaker now. Chapter 9 is the different avenues that different resources that we use to build our mental toughness. Chapter 10, we talk about the many different avenues to recovery. A lot of people, when they think addiction, they think AA and rehab, right? That's typically what people think. Well, in my humble opinion, AA is more of an aftercare thing. Now, it works for some, getting into recovery initially, but for the most part, it's more of an aftercare thing. So we also talk about, like, in recovery or in rehab, what does that look like? Well, there's also mindfulness. We talk about IOP. We talk about smart recovery, recovery 2.0. We talk about different resources for the family, Al-Anon, Nar-Anon. We're all three of us are coaches, so we talk about our coaching practices and working with people, addicts in recovery, family members of addicts, whether they're in recovery or active addiction or whatever. And then chapter 11, we wrap the book up with a call to action. What are you guys going to do? Are you going to sink or are you going to swim? What legacy do you want to leave behind? What ripple effect do you want to leave? Do you want to leave the ripple effect like the tsunami in Japan? Or do you want to have a lasting legacy like you see people around here doing now at this event here? Right?
Yeah.
And then each chapter ends with a series of questions for the reader to apply what they just read to their own life. And I've even had people that only, they like wine and that kind of thing and aren't really don't really have a major problem and haven't really been affected by addiction to a large degree, but they're reading these questions going, shit, that applies to me. Right? And it starts to plant those seeds, even for people that just like to drink socially, it starts to plant those seeds.
Right.
So this book the main mission of this book is for people to start recovering out loud.
Okay. So is it for somebody, well, I guess it's for everybody, but for somebody that is in active addiction, somebody's in recovery, is it for the family? It kind of sounds like it's for everybody.
And that's the beautiful thing about this book is, there's a lot of phenomenal books out there. I'm not dogging any book whatsoever. But the thing is, the unique thing about this book is we have 3 completely different perspectives on addiction, all with the same goal of fighting the stigma, helping people understand that recovering out loud is the best way to go, right? And creating a book as a resource for everybody, whether you're the family member, whether you're the addict, the alcoholic, whether you're the colleague, whether you're the friend, whether you're the subordinate, the boss, the business partner, the neighbor. Like, it doesn't matter. Like, this book, anybody can use this book as a resource. Absolutely anybody. And the thing is, there's a lot of people out there that don't realize that they're affected, even by a minute degree. Right? And this book is a good educational piece for them to get good insights to what's going on with an addict and what's going on with the family. A statistic that I heard was 1 in 10 Americans are dealing with a drug abuse problem currently. 1 in 10. Now, I don't know about you guys.
I'd say it's higher than that.
Well, but here's the thing. I take this statistic one step further, right? 1 in 10 Americans are dealing with a drug abuse problem currently. I don't know about you guys. I know more than 9 people.
Yeah.
So what that statistic should tell you is every single person in this country is affected by addiction to some degree.
Right. Whether it's somebody they know, themselves.
Right.
Yeah. So,
right.
Okay.
Right. And so this book is for absolutely anybody. Whether you're the addict who you have in your mind 0 ties to any addiction whatsoever. And I say in your mind because everybody has a tie in somewhere to some degree.
They don't realize it. We're talking with Scott Leeper. The book is Drowning in Addiction, Sink or Swim. Scott, you mentioned your sister. How many siblings do you have?
I have 3 sisters.
3 sisters. So, okay. Oh, sorry.
I have 3 sisters and 3 sisters-in-law. No brothers.
Yeah. So, when your dad was going through the fight of his life, was there? I mean, everybody reacts in a different way.
Yeah.
Was there any part of the family or maybe siblings that were like, you know what, I'm done with it. I can't do it anymore.
So my middle sister and my younger sister have different dads, and so really it was me and my older sister that were affected the most. And honestly, it was me. There was at one point me and him stopped talking over $250. I talk about it in the book. It was actually $250 on. It was a Verizon judgment on my credit report. When me and my wife got married, me and my dad had a shared account. We split it, and he never went in and switched the information and didn't pay the bill, and so it went on my account. I didn't see it until I was in Japan, and and essentially had to settle out and all this other stuff. And so me and him didn't talk for 2.5 years over that.
Wow.
Now, realistically, in the grand scheme of things, it's pretty petty, right?
It is.
Right.
And so, and all the while I'm in Okinawa, like my sister's dealing with a lot of the stuff. Like my dad's staying there, my dad pissing on her couch because he's drunk out of his mind. Her having to go pick him up when he got picked up by the Rochester PD on suspicion of drunk driving. She dealt with a lot of it, and and so. But the thing is, the reason me and him. We made amends, and this was probably the first time we really talked. Was I want to say the Thanksgiving prior to his death, and we had just made amends. He was supposed to meet me at my sister's house. He lived half a block down the street. He didn't show up. I'm like, what the fuck? So I walked down to his house, knocked on the door. He's 3 sheets to the wind already, and he's swaying. I walk in. I take stock of what I see. This little shithole apartment, the place looks like a recycling plant for alcohol containers.
Jeez.
It's everywhere. I'm talking stockpiles of empty containers that are as tall as this kitchen counter. No bullshit.
Wow.
And as soon as I took stock in that, then I looked at him and I go, what the fuck are you doing? And at that point, he looks at me, and he starts bawling like my 6-year-old son, and he says, look at me. He says, I'm fat, I'm nasty, nobody loves me, nobody wants me. This is my escape, and he points to what he was drinking, right? I had zero clue how to react to that. But that was really the turning point when I started realizing that there was an issue. Here's the thing, though. I didn't do shit about it, right? All the while, my sister's trying to help him out. Not really like, hey, you need to get rehab, just you can stay here kind of thing, right? And, but then it was, the ball fell on my shoulders to take him off life support, and so I was severely affected by his death, specifically from the addiction. And, the day that I took him off life support, I'm kind of going on now here, but.
Good. No, you're fine. This is interesting,
The day we took him off life support, So I'll tell the full count. So basically, the day before he died, 2 days before he died, he woke up out of he was in a coma, and he woke up at one point. Now at this point, this was down in Indianapolis. I took my wife, who was 6 months pregnant at the time, back up to South Bend so her family can see her and that kind of thing. And my sister and I came back the next day, and he came out of his coma, and he starts talking, trying to say Jenny's name, my sister. And so she starts talking to him, and he looks at me and tries to say my wife's name, Ashley. And I said, do you want to see her? And I knew he was with us because whenever I asked him a stupid question, he was like, yeah, right? And that's what he did. So I was like, hell yeah, he's with us, right? So I said, okay. I said, well, we're going to go back up. I'll pick him up. We'll come back down. We'll see you tomorrow. Okay, sweet. And we took off. Well, the next morning, I get a phone call from the hospital, and they're like, hey, he slipped back into his coma. He's bleeding rectally, and he's bleeding from his mouth. We need your permission to get him back into surgery to stop the bleeding. And of course, I went high to the right. What the fuck are you doing? Like, seriously, go now. Why are you on the phone with me? Hindsight's 20/20, but they needed permission regardless.
Right. Yeah.
They were like, well, it should be a 45-minute procedure. I said, okay, we're on our way.